Hi, my name is Elisabeth Williams, and I'm the production designer on The Handmaid's Tale. Today we're going to take an in-depth look at some of my favorite scenes from season 4. The farm set is a perfect example of what we go through for each set to ensure that we have the most realistic, the most accurate set to deliver. So we'd done a lot of research. It was specifically scripted that it was a fellowship farm, which I, coming from Canada and being my age, I had no idea had actually really existed. So we did some research. We found out, where fellowship farms were invented. We visited a whole bunch of farms in and around Toronto, and to finally come upon this gorgeous estate in just northwest of Toronto, which we used as our farm. This location had been completely abandoned, or should I say, it was completely overgrown. The fences were broken. We spent over a month, 6 weeks actually, getting this location ready for our shoot. So this is the first time that June meets Mrs. Keyes, actually. She, as you've seen in the show, she wakes up in her bed. She's been ill for such a long time. She didn't know, actually, when she arrived, who Mrs. Keyes was. So the relationship between June and Mrs. Keyes in this clip is important. Here, let's just stop here for 1 second. It was important for us to find a farm or location that made Mrs. Keyes look even smaller than she already is. We'd never seen on this show, we'd never seen a young mistress before. And it makes her look even more adolescent and petite. And what's interesting about this as well is that when we first started the show was before the pandemic, of course. It was March, and we shot 10 days at this location, and the grounds were covered in snow. So the color of the costume of the farmhands, the handmaids, was a lot more, let's say, contrasted on the white snow than it is, of course, in this environment. But once we came back after the 6-month hiatus due to the pandemic, it was decided that, of course, we had no time to start over. And we thought that this was just as beautiful, just different. And so we kept going. Okay, so here June is entering the main house for the first time. She's looking for Mrs. Keyes. And she is going to meet Commander Keyes and actually understand what is going on in this house. We basically rebuilt the interior of the existing location, which was just an empty space that kind of looks like a barn. All these sections here, we added a door, we changed all the lighting, we sanded and waxed the floors. Basically, everything that you see in these frames was added by the art department. I usually read a script about 2 or 3 times. Probably 3. After the first reading, I will start building a mood board. And that is, I will spend days building a mood board. If you look at this image here, it's almost reproduced in the set. You'll see the vase and the open window with the shafts of light. All those things are what we get our inspiration from. Margaret Atwood has said before in an interview that there was nothing that she writes, that she's written about, that hasn't really ever existed in the world. So she doesn't invent history. History is actually there. And so it's kind of the same for production design or any art, really. It's to take from what already exists and to create a new entity. And that's what we do. And I mean, to come up with this particular mood board, in my files, there must be 100 pictures. And then I select the ones that go together. So what was interesting for me in this image is the juxtaposition of the paint color and the wallpaper. We ended up not using wallpaper, but what it did in the end was create like a color palette that I was happy about. It creates a tone that then the entire art department and even the lighting department is able to work with. Well, what's interesting about that particular scene is that the window panes that are in the door the way that we made them was that we actually molded wallpaper. We couldn't find the proper glass that we were interested in having. We wanted something textured, we wanted something bourgeois, and we wanted something a little bit Renaissance, and we weren't able to find it. And so we used anaglypta wallpaper and we molded it, and then we put the mold on a piece of glass and then painted over the mold. So each pane of glass is actually a little bit different from the next. And then we actually had 5 different options for the DOP on the day, and we cut out a little triangle in the corner that June could look through to see what was going on inside the house. That's just an example of the detail that goes into the production design of this show. It's actually mind-boggling. And one of our jobs is to be able to go on location and see beyond the walls and the structures that other people might not see, are able to develop into a set. So in this picture here, you probably recognize the kitchen of the Fellowship Farm. We had the table here in the middle. We had the kitchen here in the back. So what we did is we actually built windowsills so that we could have shutters and give it a bit of a Tarkovsky look to the set. We also added, and then here we can look at some construction drawings, but we also added dividers on each one of these posts. We wanted to give the room a little bit more shape so that it didn't look like one large space. There's the kitchen in the back, the dining room in the middle, and then there's a little bit of a salon here in the front of the page. And I always find it fascinating, and it makes me very proud. Each time when a set is shot and when I see it up on screen, and I notice that it is so much like the mood board that I did months before anyone had even started working on the show. Every single time it gives me a sensation of just happiness. And I love my job. It's true. I just love my job. So after June has been captured and sent to the compound for her punishment, the commanders want to know where the other handmaids are because no handmaid should go unused, and she won't tell them. So she's tortured. And the last torture and the way that they get her to speak is to bring her to Hannah, who they've imprisoned in a glass box. So it was a glass box because Hannah is a treasure. She's like the ballerina in a jewelry box. And it was not only a way for June to see her and to be able to almost touch her. The idea is that this is an atrium or an auditorium where commanders and soldiers can learn how to either torture or treat or watch different prisoners. And so the idea of a glass box being in the middle is that no matter where you are in the room, you're able to see what's going on. And it's also visually very stunning. And that was probably the main reason of all. Some of the main challenges with designing the box, of course, was that we didn't want any seams in it. Unfortunately, we had to have certain seams in it. The pieces of glass were very high. They are over 8 feet high. And so it's extremely difficult to keep glass straight. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't dangerous for Hannah or for Lizzie. The entire episode, which was directed by Lizzie herself, is set inside this locale, this location. And we had some of the sets, some of the jail cells were in the studio, some of them were on location, and some of them were a hybrid of both. And so we had to ensure that there was a seamless transition between a cell when she is in the studio and a cell when she is on location. And so there are a variety of challenges that came with that. So for the eyes compound, this was a new level of Gilead that we'd never seen before. And we decided to come up with a Gilead logo. The idea being, of course, that the eyes see you wherever you are and whenever. And so to have an eye right in the middle of the set. And I think and this was an idea that we had within the art department. And when Lizzie and Stuart saw it on the day, they decided they were going to start their shot right over the eye because they thought it was so cool. So yeah, it was the new symbol for the eyes that was associated to this compound, which was our version of the CIA.
What kind of resistance are you?
The kind that survives.
Once June escapes from the compound with the help of Commander Blaine, she finally arrives in Chicago and she's hoping to fight with the resistance. There was a lot of collaboration with visual effects in episode 5 because, of course, art department and visual effect had to work hand in hand to ensure that, we had the most accurate look possible. It was the first time for me, anyway, that I had such close contact with visual effects throughout the entire show. And I absolutely loved the experience. And art department provided visual effects with a lot of the facades. We built the facades and sent them. And then we also created some matte paintings for them to use. We were in a very small town called Brantford, Ontario. And one thing that was good about this town was a lot of the buildings actually do look like certain areas of Chicago, on the eastern seaboard in general. In Toronto and Montreal and Boston, there's certain similarities architecturally, which helps. And so by extending with visual effects, we were able to recreate something that we feel was close enough. So this is practical, 100%. This building exists, but it's basically covered over with a different architecture. And this is all visual effects. So in this picture here, there are some very interesting visual effect maneuvers. So this side of the street is all practical, except that in our original shot, so as you may know, we use the street twice. We use the street as she's leaving Chicago. She's left Janine behind, and she decides that she's going to go off on her own, and she hides under 2 police cars. So this is where the police cars were. And our visual effects teams basically replaced the police cars with the taxis. So in this scene, June and her acolytes are actually on their way to the Field Museum to do some trading when they're intercepted or almost intercepted by Gilead patrol. And so they enter this pizza shop, this abandoned pizza shop. We obtained permission from Dante's Pizzeria in Chicago to use their logo. This was actually an abandoned restaurant, which was great for us because we were able to go in, paint it in the colors that we want, dress it, etc., break some windows and get it ready to shoot. We built this banquette specifically for the shot because the restaurant was completely empty. And we strategically placed, of course, the bullet holes so that her eye line was directly on his gun. June and her resistance buddies haven't been found by the Gilead patrol. And so now they're finally going to go to the marketplace to try to exchange some goods. The script called for the Field Museum in Chicago, which, as you can possibly imagine, doesn't exist in Toronto. And so we decided to use this atrium of a gorgeous building, but we decided to basically take our Field Museum and make it tiny. And our decorator found some dinosaurs to rent, and I think it worked out well. And so this is a scene where basically the various resistance groups in Chicago get together and exchange some goods. Some of them are more arms, others collect food, and together that's how they survive. This is a very props-heavy set, props and set deck heavy sets. So of course we have all the arms, we have the gasoline jugs, the batteries, we have flashlights, we have clothes, we have canned goods. As you can imagine, in a set like this one, the companies aren't usually very keen on allowing us to use their brands, and so we create our own. When you feel so tired, but you can't sleep. So at the very end, after Janine finds June and they're trying to find their way across Chicago, Gilead bombs Chicago. And Janine disappears in the rubble, and June wakes up, is looking for her. and there's dust and smoke and broken buildings. So what's interesting about this scene is that we actually shot it twice in two different locations. During the editing process, Bruce felt like there were some pieces missing. So basically what was missing from the original footage is the arrival of the first aids team. And it made no sense, really, that Moira would just appear out of nowhere. And so we had to add the scenes of the vehicles coming and the first aid people pouring out of the vehicles. And so at the very end of our show, we weren't able to go back to this location. We weren't able to redress this level of dressing. It was just too much. And so we found another location that was actually nothing like it. And we rebuilt the set. We redressed the set. And Lizzie shot it. So the smoke, of course, was really helpful. And the editing and the camera positions. Okay, you see this here, this white building? Okay, so that's location number 1, very important. This building actually is non-existent in our second location. That's one set, and then that's another set. You see this line here? There's basically a big metal beam that actually goes across the set here. That's in our new set, our new location. You also see there's like this metal structure in this other location that wasn't, of course, in our original location, but we hid it with smoke. And everything is actually not quite the same, but you can't tell because of the framing. Like this ladder, it wasn't actually the exact same ladder. But, who would ever notice? This is maybe a little bit embarrassing, but no, this is my my quick sketch of what I imagined the crater to be once the bomb had hit and the car. Now the perspective is a little off, but I fiddle around with these things and then I pass it on to the real artists like Michael Dara or the set designers who then design a set. So we're going to talk about the aid station. What's interesting about this set is that originally it was a pre-pandemic set and there were supposed to be hundreds of people. And as we were following the COVID safety rules, the amount of extras that we were allowed to have was dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. And so from a set that was supposed to be like a 400-person set, we ended up in about a 50-person set. So a lot of changes were made, within a week of shooting. Most of our tents actually had lost their canvas before. So we decided that they had already been packing. They were already on their way out when Moira and June arrived, which wasn't part of the original script. A space that was supposed to be a little bit more orderly, a little bit calm. Help had finally come from Canada, turned into absolute chaos and fit right in with the rest of our show. It's not a political statement, but this is something that we see regularly on the news and we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years. And so the research actually wasn't really difficult to do. For us in the art department, this is a 3-month process from the moment we read the script until the moment that we build the set. In The Handmaid's Tale, a lot of care is put into putting the set at the forefront of oftentimes of what's going on, as though the set was an actor in and of itself. And for me, it's actually very gratifying to see the final version of most of the sets that I designed. Once June finally makes it to Toronto, we hope that she finds some solace there, but it's impossible for her. It's impossible for her because of Hannah, and it's impossible for her to imagine that Commander Waterford is going to get away with the crimes that he's committed, both towards her, towards her daughter, and towards everyone else that she loves. So she embarks on a mission to hurt him and to make certain that he doesn't get away with it. And so with her friend, she takes him to the woods and he meets his demise. And so we shot at a conservation area outside of Toronto, of course, and we built this wall, which was supposed to be an old brick building that had been left unkempt for dozens of years or tens of a decade or whatever, and was falling apart and out of sight. June literally puts Fred on the wall, and we'll see what happens next season. Will someone find him? Will he have been eaten by crows? Who knows? I can't wait to find out. It says, Nolite te bastardes carborundorum, which means don't let the bastards get you down. And it's her signature, basically. Everyone will know that she is the one who did this. June wrote it in her wardrobe. She wrote it on the wall when she set the house on fire, and she writes it again here. When Liz Garber, the director for episode 10, came to Toronto, she commented so many times on how lucky we were to have such a cohesive, friendly, in tune team. Everybody gets along, and it makes for a really great place to work. I mean, we work crazy hours last season. It was absolutely insane. Weeks and weeks on end, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day in our department. It was ridiculous. And yet, somehow we managed to make it happen without killing each other. And I think it's because we're producing such a great body of work on such a pertinent show with producers who are fair, and it's wonderful. It really is.